Welcome to episode 40 of Fitness and Thinking with Amy Stevens, a registered dietitian based in New York. We got into so many topics in this episode. What stood out for you, would you say, Amy?
I think there were lots of things that stood out, but just about talking about how to fuel somebody for their life and for their exercise and just making it sustainable and keeping people healthy and accomplishing their goals.
I think the way that you are able to approach this as somebody in the research, as an athlete yourself, and as a mum has just really helped to add texture and flavor to the conversation. I'll say it again, I really appreciate what you put in and brought to it.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was really nice, really great conversation.
Make sure to check Amy out on her socials, her website. Make sure to give Fitness and Thinking a like and follow. And if you've not subscribed yet, please do. Let's grow this thing together. Let's get into it. Amy, when you wake up in the morning, what's your mission? What do you set out to do?
Wow, that's a big question to start with. What do I set out to do? I always like to have a roadmap of what I'm going to be doing for the day, like maybe 3 things I want to accomplish. Because I have my own business, I always have something related to that. And then I always run. I always start with a run in the morning. So I know I'm doing that. That's already predetermined. And then, yeah, like 3 things that I want to do for the day. And I kind of sometimes have to write those down and keep a list if I need to. And then I kind of cross it off as I go through the day. But I always have like some type of structure to my day because I want to get the most out of it that I can.
You are an athlete, you coach people, you're a dietitian. You are as multifaceted as people can be. Do you want to take us through what a typical task list might look like for you?
Oh, so a typical task list, like let's do today. Yeah. That could be fun. So today, waking up, I knew I was going to go for a run, but then my kids are home and I had to drive one of them to the train. So I knew that was going to take up some time, but I know that I was going to be working on this with you today. And so I kind of allotted for the rest of my day. And I know I have to see patients for 2 hours or 3 hours later this afternoon. And then there's certain emails that I need to send out to my teams. So I kind of have ideas on what I'm going to be sending out to them. For example, like one of my teams, they're in, actually all my teams are transitioning from indoor season to outdoor for track. So it's like, what does that look like for them? So I want to kind of give them reminders on what they need to be thinking about fueling wise, like maybe certain athletes might need to be getting their labs tested because it's a down week. So that might be a good time to do that. Or maybe it's like just checking in, like, are we underfueled? Are we getting enough? How do we get our bodies prepared for the next phase of training? So, I'll kind of create some emails to send those out. I think that's also, on my list of things to do. And then dinner, always dinner. I always have an outline of what I'm doing for dinner, and I start looking up recipes, and I'll have some time today. Today's a nice day in New York, so we're going to barbecue. So I'm thinking about what I want to cook for dinner.
Yeah, so we started the conversation with food, which means that we're going to be hungry in about an hour's time.
Totally. If I start telling you all the things that I've been making, I've been doing really well lately. So having some good recipes. So we could maybe talk about that at the end.
When you think about your job specifically, and you think about how we eat, what we eat, are you focused primarily on athletes? Do you ever work with Gen Pop? What does the typical patient or client look like for you?
So the people that I tend to work with, and I've been doing this practice I've been a dietitian for 25 years. And over my entire career, I've evolved with the types of patients that I've worked with. I initially started out working with people that had diabetes, and I was very much involved in blood sugar regulation and teaching people how to avoid having diabetes, how to work with it if they did have diabetes. And it kind of evolved to like working with athletes, like maybe in the middle part of my career. And I started running more, and I was experimenting with myself and doing a lot of different things with nutrition. And I learned a lot about how to fuel properly. Even as a dietitian, you don't really learn the nuances of how to fuel as an athlete. So I became more involved at that time. So I really became more specified in athletes and endurance athletes in particular. But the type of person I work with is someone who wants to perform their best, like in any sport, or even in their job. If they have a very rigorous job that is requiring them to be on and they're giving presentations, it's like, how do we make sure our bodies are ready to be at our very best? So it's the mentality and that kind of mindset that I work with. And then the everyday person, yeah, I work with those people too. Someone who's just looking to feel their best. Maybe that's someone who is looking for some guidance, like anyone who wants to see an improvement. But I think the thing that I don't necessarily adapt to or work as closely with is like people that are just looking to have a certain body, like an aesthetic. Like it's more about performance, like whatever it is that we are looking to achieve in terms of performance, that is who I can work with.
Amazing. And when you think about performance and you think of these different people, I guess there will be different use cases. But if we start generically and then go specifically maybe towards athletes, you know, because you and I coach and I'm interested personally in the approach that you take to it. And I think we've got a lot of crossover. What do people get wrong, should we say, generally about food? And you and I have already thought about the 6 pillars of fitness as I've laid them out, and probably we could get into each of them. I'm wondering also if there's like an education bit that people might get wrong with it. I'm thinking just off the top to help shape where we go, because we could go in so many directions that emotionality might be a part of it and kind of attachment to food. You've already discussed disordered eating. So when we're thinking about somebody coming new to you and you're wanting to take them from A to B, how are you going to help structure their journey, their path?
Yeah, I mean, I can walk you through like what an assessment might seem, you know, what it looks like, because I think everyone approaches nutrition differently too. So you might ask 10 different dietitians how they conduct a session, and it might be completely different depending on their specialty and what the goals are. So first I start with, what are the goals? I ask someone, what are your goals? You know, what are you looking to achieve by working with a dietitian? Most people know exactly what they're looking for. Some people are like, I have no idea, and I'm just looking to have a conversation. So then, you know, we have to kind of establish I always like to have a goal of some kind that we're trying to accomplish. So most commonly are there things like, yeah, performance. I want to perform better, or I'm having a specific issue, a GI issue, or my energy's low, or I'm not sure what to eat. I just need to kind of start from the beginning. How do I learn how to eat? So, you know, all different types of clients. And then, so then I would start with like what their days look like. Are they working? Are they home? Like I need to get a sense of where are they in their day to day? Where are they getting their food? Are they working from home? Do they have access to the kitchen? Are they on a college campus? Are they in a dorm? Like what access do they have? Are their parents cooking for them? Like wonderful. Like that makes it, that's so awesome when that happens. And I work with some individuals where they have chefs that cook all their meals and they just want to have a prescription, tell them what to cook for me. So all different things. So getting a sense of that, and then like medical history, what does that look like? You know, have we seen doctors? Are we seeing doctors for regular medical issues? Is there a GI issue like that you're seeing a doctor for? Like I need to know that. That's really important. That's going to affect what kind of foods we're going to recommend. Is there mental health issues that are in play, or that you're being an athlete or an individual is being treated for? That's going to affect how they're eating. And are they and then once I get a sense of that, I ask more questions just to see, like, are these issues that are going to, are they medically stable? Like, do we feel okay? Do we need to still get actively treated by that particular physician? And then medications, are we taking any medications? What are those prescription medications? I need to know. Are they on certain things that influence their eating and their appetite? We need to know that. Any supplements, and why? A lot of people are taking many, many different supplements, and maybe they know why, and sometimes they don't. So I would be curious about that. And then any history of an eating disorder. I always ask athletes that in particular, or family members that have had either disordered eating or even on diets. Were they raised in a household where there was a lot of diet talk? Because that is going to have an effect on how they eat. And I think the initial assessment is really just getting someone to talk and getting to know them and know and understand what their relationship to food is like. And then what else do I ask about exercise? Any time off from training? I'd like to know why. And what their goals are for their exercise. Maybe it's like to get to the gym, 4 times a week for an hour, and just enjoy it and just finish a workout. It's been a very tough winter in New York. So maybe it's like just getting to the gym and getting out the door. That's an awesome goal. And like, that's maybe what they're doing. Or maybe it's to get their body ready because they're going to start training for the New York City Marathon. Maybe that starts in June. Training blocks typically start around June. So like, depending on what their goals are. And then I would estimate what their bodies need based on all that information and build out a plan. And I do like overviews. I don't do specific every day, here's exactly what you need to be eating, because then all of a sudden it becomes challenging. Like here we have this really great goal of improving performance, or having this other really amazing performance goal, and now we're giving them so much more work to do to find these foods. So it's more about creating like an outline. So let's start with breakfast. And I would also get a recall, like a dietary recall. Like, what are they currently doing? If they could be starting to eat at like, maybe they're running or exercising for an hour or two in the morning, and they don't start eating until 1 or 2 o'clock because they're busy. And then they eat a huge dinner and go to bed with a stomach ache, or have other issues kind of emerge. So I want to know what that is, what's going on right now, and is that working? And then we make adjustments. And then I provide education. Like, here's what I would recommend, and here's what I've seen do well, work well with some of my other athletes. And let's try that. Let's experiment. And let's see if that makes you feel better, or you feel like you're building more muscle, or reduces the cravings, or maybe reduces the thinking about food in between meals. Like, there's so many things that erupt, or that I've learned through an assessment. And we're trying to kind of build a plan that's going to address those and help them to function well. And most people have jobs, or they're in school. So the professional athletes I work with, there's not many, right? So like, as a professional athlete, that's their job. So they have time to take a nap, to build a really proper meal, or to eat a big lunch at the right time every day. But someone who's working, like, they have to also do other things, and they may not have the time. So like, how do we build out a plan that supports all of that? It's not so easy.
Huge. I mean, if you've got any spaces, can I sign up? That's the amount of detail and the questions and the thinking, that there's only so much that a PT could get into on the gym floor, and a concern that I have among my peers and in the industry that I'm in is that I think some people think that they can pay for a personal trainer, they can show up to the gym once or twice a week, and then that's it. That's their health and their fitness sorted. But what actually moves the needle is the everything else in between those sessions. And are you going to get the most from those sessions if you're not eating appropriately enough for them, and if you're not doing the everything else that you're asking about?
I think you brought up a really great point. So when I start a session with someone, I also want them to understand this is a very big time commitment. It's not like we are dialing this in and it's going to be really easy, and you just show up to a session, or you show up to an exercise session, and you should start to, like you said, move the needle. There's a lot of planning and thoughts that go into like changing your lifestyle. If that's what you're looking to do, it's not so easy. So I think what you said is really awesome. And what I start with sessions, and what's really important, is the outline. Like, this is going to require, here's your time commitment. It's going to require time. And it may even have to, if someone is in a college setting and they're going out with friends a lot, like, that might change their social scene. Like, it just is it requires time and a big commitment. And I think that's a really important point.
There's a tension that I've observed in the UK, and I wonder if you've seen it in the States too, of statistically more people, we're close to 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, maybe 2 in 3 people are overweight from a medical standpoint. But when I work with people who maybe have these body goals, or are trying to get better at a sport, or fit into a wedding dress, or maybe do all of it all at the same time, what I typically see is people actually undereating, kind of what I would perceive to be underfueling, particularly for the work that we're trying to do. So there's a lovely moment in the gym today where a woman in her 40s was curious about an exercise I was doing. So about 4 weeks ago, she was curious about this exercise I was doing, and I showed her how to do it. It was basically a chest supported pull down, and you lean into one side and you really contract your lat. And it's a horrible, horrible feeling underneath your rib cage, basically from the origin of the lat right at the lower extremity of the rib cage. And it's an amazing contraction. And I think it's helped with the sweep that I've built, and I've helped other people build. And that was shown to me by a different bodybuilder. It's a movement that's been shown to me that I've enjoyed, and getting to show it to other people is a treat. It's something that I love to do. And I showed her how to do it. And she'd never felt that contraction before. And I think it was quite a lot. And when she stood up, she then didn't stand up. You know, she almost immediately hit the floor. And I just, you know, sat down with her and I said, "Are you all right? What's up? What are you feeling?" And she said, "Oh, you know, just really lightheaded, feeling quite weak." And I said, "Oh, have you got water with you?" Yeah, I've had a sip of water, but she didn't have a bottle. "Have you had any food today?" No, I've not had any food. Okay. And, you know, that was quite challenging, wasn't it? Yeah. And you've already done an hour of lifting weights. I know you're going to tell me to eat more food. And she's like, "Yes, I am. You know, you're doing intense exercise and I've shown you something that is, you know, maybe intermediate to advanced. And if you don't have anything in your stomach and you aren't hydrated, you know, this could potentially happen." Anyway, she was a bit sheepish about it. I made sure that she got something from the cafe downstairs. She took, you know, 5 minutes, got her breath back. And then, you know, every now and then we see each other in the gym. She caught me today and I was an hour into my session and I'd just done some very heavy leg work for me. And I was leant on the machine like this. And she's like, "You've gone hypo, haven't you?" I was like, No. I'm all right. I promise.
Fatigue. It's good fatigue.
It's good fatigue. That's what I tried to explain. You know, I had my liquid with me. I'd had a good pre-workout meal, but I appreciated the way that she checked in based on the experience that she'd had. And it's that thing of we learn from each other all the time. And what happened to her, I know if my session's longer than an hour, I'm probably going to need to eat in my session to keep it going. Otherwise, that good fatigue actually does become something like, maybe, and you help me out with this, you know, being hypo and not being able to finish a session, having to cut a session short because I didn't actually prepare for it appropriately.
Yeah, and it's like, how much is she getting out of the session if she's underfueled and her muscles are weak, and then it's just potentially increasing the risk of injury. So I think, you know, one thing you had asked earlier is like, what are people getting wrong? The one thing I would say is like, it's an all or nothing approach. Like, why do we need to think like we have to either be dieting or overeating? It's about being somewhere in the middle, like fueling our bodies without overdoing it, not having to cut out one thing, cut out carbs or cut out sugar, you know, it's, or eat tons of protein. It's not one thing. It's like balance, and it's about eating more balanced and then fueling properly, like you said, and then she'll have a much more pleasant experience in her workout and recover and maybe accomplish the goals that she's looking to accomplish. But I think it's the all or nothing mentality. And I get that a lot too. And actually someone reached out to me today, and this is, you know, I've so many firsts. And this was the first time someone said, "I'd like to work with you because I have been dieting and I read on your blog all of the information and the signs and symptoms of REDS. And I think I have that because I'm not eating enough." So like, that's what happens. So if I could tell someone, like, if you're engaging in a body changing kind of program, if you're going to just reduce your calorie intake too much and create this huge deficit, it's like we should have informed consent. The informed consent means, well, here's the side effects of when you decide to do that. Side effects are low energy, difficulty recovering from a workout, possibly passing out during a workout, difficulty concentrating in your job, not improving muscle mass and actually increasing fat mass. That's how your body responds when it's in this acute, like, or longer term calorie deficit. That's informed consent. And like, people don't understand just cutting calories can actually have really negative effects on their body. And I think there's just lack of information about that. There's just the thought of like, let me just look like that person. I just want to look like that and get lean, cut out, you know, reduce my body fat. Well, everyone has a different amount of body fat that their bodies can naturally stay at. And the Olympic athletes they can tolerate a lower body fat. Their bodies are just able to do that. I couldn't. Like, I'd probably break if I tried to exercise and lower my body fat to a level. It's genetic, and that's, you know, I can't change that. I can improve where I'm at, and I can definitely there's a big range of what I can do within my genetic predisposition, but it's you know, we all think we can have a low body fat and change it in the way we want without any consequence.
You've mentioned a term there that we could probably expand for a couple of people. So REDS.
So it's probably a new term for a lot of people. They may not be familiar with it. It's become more popular lately, but it stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. And it used to be called the Female Athlete Triad, and which kind of included this constellation of of issues related to bone, menstrual dysfunction, and eating disorder. And it was really categorized as like, or focused on females, because only females had this. But as we've learned more, and these are all new terms, like 2014, it kind of was starting out, and then 2018, it was revised to be called REDS, and it included men. And there was just another revision, 2023, I believe. There was the most recent revision. And it's really driven by these awesome researchers that have discovered a constellation of medical issues that kind of arise from not eating enough for prolonged periods of time. And why it's called relative energy deficiency in sport is because exercise creates a greater deficit. And people that are exercising and not eating enough have this huge gap of what their bodies are using and how much they need. So in the short term, it might actually be quite adaptable and our bodies can do well. But in the long term, it becomes more of a problem and bigger issues arise when those deficits are just prolonged. It starts to affect bones. I mean, it starts to affect the entire body. It can affect like physical symptoms, like fatigue, poor recovery, frequent illnesses. I mean, these are things that I definitely see with athletes, every single one. Bone stress injuries, very common. I also see like decreased performance. Like, if someone's trying to increase their performance, this is not going to help them. This is actually going to have the opposite effect. Menstrual dysfunction for women, also nutrient deficiencies. So like low iron levels, low vitamin D levels. If you're not eating enough, your body is going to show it by having these deficiencies. Impaired glycogen storage, like you're not able to store the amount of glycogen your body needs in order to do any type of sport, not just endurance, but like even the lifting. You don't have enough for an hour of a workout if your body is chronically depleted. Men also experience it, which is newer research, which I have definitely seen as well. I work with all the different teams in a university, and the wrestlers, that's very common when they're trying to cut weight. Like they might experience like sleep issues. Low testosterone levels are more common in men, and men have the testosterone, but like the morning fasting, the morning levels of testosterone are oftentimes suppressed. And I've worked with athletes experiencing that, and they don't know that that's necessarily happening. They're just like, my performance isn't there. And then once I do an evaluation and we start asking more questions and diving a little deeper and getting a whole sense of what's going on and what their approach to fueling is, you can kind of get a better sense, because REDS and eating disorders have a big overlap. So it's important to also understand, is this intentional or is this maybe like unintentional? Maybe they're starting to train at a higher intensity. Maybe they're at the start of a training block, or they're starting university sports and their intensity goes through the roof. Or maybe they just signed up for training sessions with you and they didn't adjust their food. And all of a sudden they're starting to have these negative symptoms. And we have to think like these hormones, like testosterone for men and estrogen for women, like these hormones not just our sex hormones, but they also control a lot of functions in our body. It's like our natural steroids. So if those are low, we're going to see that. Like, and then, taking a steroid obviously is not healthy for our bodies, but we're not addressing, other issues that might be going on.
There's so much in this. And I'd like to maybe pick at some of the threads, as many as I can catch, because I think what you've talked through there is unbelievable. Personal experience for the most recent bit, when I first got a gym membership, I was going to university, to college, and drinking, 4 or 5 times a week potentially, and then trying to go to a gym 3 times a week. And in the first 3 months of that, my energy was completely crumpled. I obviously wasn't getting enough sleep. I obviously wasn't doing well with my nutrition. And then suddenly I was expecting to grow muscle and be in shape or be lean or ripped or whatever. And how was that ever going to happen? Actually, the exercise was probably taking me further into the red zone, if you will, that I was in bigger bother for doing the amount of exercise I was trying to do in this suboptimal sleep and nutrition setup, and I was moody. I was falling asleep in lectures. Now that's standard student stuff, but I actually was just falling asleep because I couldn't keep my eyes open, and I was missing social things. I wasn't hitting deadlines. The first 3 months of uni really shook my system, because I wasn't used to that demand on my body in any scenario. But I didn't necessarily know at that point how to address any of it, and I certainly didn't think that food was going to be the cause of it. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the sleep, but that's what happens when you're in your first year of college, your first year of university, right? Everybody goes through that, right?
Right. And you think it's normal. And right. And I think that's also hard for like athletes because initially they might still be performing well, or their weight doesn't go down right away. They could still have reds if their weight is the same. It's still a gap between how much you're eating and how much you're exerting yourself. So it presents in different ways. I'll often ask people in an initial session, like, have you ever felt signs and symptoms of underfueling? And sometimes they may say, well, I don't know what those are. And I will list many of them. And then all of a sudden that light bulb might go off and say, wait a second. And everyone experiences it different to themselves and their own circumstances. My teenagers I had one teenager, she said that she would pick a fight with her mom for absolutely no reason. And she's like, that's when I know I need to eat a snack because I am irritable and argumentative. So it's like you have to, if you can kind of make a connection between an emotion and making it connect with like underfueling, then you can solve the problem. But if you can't make any connections, it's just going to be like, okay, following a meal plan and being more structured with that. But it just makes you a better athlete, or makes it easier to get through your day if you're in tune with your body to say, like, I am feeling this way. What is it that I need to make it better? And so I think it's important to recognize, and that's hard when you're starting school. That's what I do with the university students, is teach them in the early part of their training. And once they start their meet up with their teams, it's like, let's remember, this is a different way of training than you're used to. So you're going to need to be filling in those fueling gaps, carrying snacks with you, eating when you can, because also when you're in uni, like, you're busy. You don't have the same schedule. One of my athletes would say, like, my mom used to make all my meals and would just hand me my food. And so I just don't even know like what to eat or when to eat. So it just requires another skill set. And someone who's looking, like we're talking about, that exerciser who's going to, working with you, like, it's just creating a plan. Whatever that plan looks like, you need a plan. Everyone is going to have a different structure in their day, different preferences, but we need a plan. Every day needs a plan. And maybe that's what I was saying when you were talking about when I wake up in the morning, I have a plan. Like, I create some type of plan for the day. I like to work that way. I feel like I'm getting more accomplished. And otherwise, it's like your food is off. You don't know when you're eating because you don't know when you're going to exercise, or you don't know when that evening is, what that's going to look like. So having a plan makes everything fall in place a little bit better.
Sure. I think what comes with a plan as well is usually goals and metrics that you can track. So with a plan, there's structure, there's an end point, there's a start point. Maybe you've got check-in points. So for my online clients, for instance, I'll check in with them maybe 2 or 3 times in the week. And most of them, there'll be a longer call at the end of 2 weeks. And it'll just be like this, and we really get into the detail of what's happened, what they felt. Are there I'm caught between 3 words there: extraneous. Let's go for extraneous circumstances. One of my clients is going through a house move at the moment, and performance maybe has been a little bit impacted. It's just like, yeah, this is stressful, and maybe one thing gives as another thing changes. And in this moment, do we expect the same amount of performance if you're worried about where your possessions are going, and if you need to sell things, and how many people you need to get involved, So with the plan, you look at what's coming up and then you adapt it. So maybe in that week of moving house, you're not in the gym 4 times, you're in twice, because the cognitive demand of moving and not knowing if you're going to be able to cook, not knowing if, probably you're not going to get food in to have in your fridge to cook in the way that you normally would, for instance. So maybe it's more takeout. Are you going to perform the same if you're eating fried chicken? Maybe not, and actually having that holistic awareness and understanding that food, sleep, the foundations of all of the bits that we're talking about now, if they change, then performance will probably change as well. And that doesn't make you a bad person. It's, let's accept it and let's build from there. Has been my approach.
That's a great point. Like, it's about being flexible. And I think that is a word I use like almost in every single session. It's not rigid mindset. Like you were asking about, I think you'd asked me about, like, in one of our pre-note questions, like, what's the difference between like a professional athlete and maybe like someone who's just exercising? I think for both of those populations, I say the exact same messaging. It's about being flexible. So if you can't get in your workout or eat the exact same way that you're eating, it's okay. Your body can adjust and maybe do what you can. It's not that all or nothing. Well, I'm going to be off this week, so I won't care about what I'm eating. I'm going to eat anything. Well, no, that's not true either. We want to fuel our bodies because we do have a lot of mentally demanding things. So like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches might be your meal, or something more simple, but it's not like all or nothing, like not caring and eating things that are not going to help your health. You're still on your same path, but maybe just slightly altered. It's not the exact same food that you normally eat. It's the flexibility, and it's not about feeling bad or guilty. It's okay to be flexible. And I think that's the hardest thing for many individuals, is to be flexible, because these plans that's what I think social media tries to teach us, is like, you've got to eat a certain way and have this rigid mindset of you're either following your plan, you're either on it or you're off it. And if you don't eat this way, it's like you've been bad. Well, says who? Like, you're eating like 30 times a week. Not every meal has to be so perfect. Like, our body works on averages. So it's about not feeling guilty or bad and having the plan, being flexible about it, and fitting in, exercise maybe whenever you can. And you're still on your same plan. It just looks different moving week.
I like that a lot. And I think the idea of averages is underlooked, and a culture that we've had in the UK, things like Slimming World, Weight Watchers. I know people who have gone into these group weight loss programs who will starve themselves before the meeting and then eat all of the things that they want to eat after they've got their points or their prizes for losing weight. Now, you and I know what's happened there. They've probably lost an amount of water and then definitely overeaten once they've got their prize, their badge to say that they're really good at weight loss. And you have this kind of ethical, moral, well done, but they've cheated a system in order to get a buzz or a sense of accomplishment, and then underdone any actual work or achievement. And it's this, did you grow up in a household that has diet culture in it, And these people, I respect a lot of them. I've even kind of loved some of them as parents and partners, and, really cared about them. But as a coach, it's not, it's one of those where sometimes you've just got to let people do what they're doing. They're not my clients, so I can't necessarily call them out on this behavior, which is a bit disordered. It's that you've done something for validation that's external to you, and you've actually changed your diet in order to get this validation, and then done something that's undercut the healthiness or whatever the goal was that you're trying to achieve. And because you're consistently inconsistent, you're not seeing the results that you want. And this will continue forever until you actually break the pattern and just start eating a little bit more ordered. Is that maybe too much to say, or?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually quite simple too. In some ways, it's eating foods, just eating whole foods and cooking when you can. And I think it's setting up a healthy relationship with food. And oftentimes that's an underlying issue that it should be addressed more openly, not cut calories, but what does our relationship with food look like? And maybe that's something that needs to be worked on. Is it like, are we using food to cope with some stress? Is there stress going on in our day, or loneliness, sadness, feelings that we don't like? Are we using food, or even boredom? I was working with an athlete, again, like understanding they work from home. And this was a person who had just had kids or had a baby and was feeling out of control and stressed. And so he's working from home, and every time he got up to take a little break, he would eat something. And I said, okay, well, what does your day look like? And he said, I have no idea what I'm eating. I am just, every time I get up, I go to the kitchen and I eat something. And I said, well, we need to create some structure. We need a meal. Like, you actually need to eat a meal. And here's what a meal looks like. And here are the components of a meal. And based on the activity you're doing, I think he was doing like running 5 to 7 miles a day. It's like, we need to make sure we're getting in these nutrients to help our bodies recover. And in the afternoon, if you're running in the morning, the afternoon, you're going to need to have a snack, and it needs to have carbohydrates to help your body replenish and keep up your energy levels. So he did great with that information. And he doesn't need a diet. He doesn't need he just needed to eat and have structure. And he was eating out of boredom. So he recognized that. And I said, and if you're feeling bored, and rather than going to the kitchen, let's redirect, New York City apartments, like London, are tiny. So it's not like you have a lot of places to go. But I said, it's a eating from boredom problem. It's not an overeating problem. So we need to figure out other ways to cope with boredom. Like, what are other strategies? And is it a stress that you have with your job or something that's related to work? Or like, it's like coping with those underlying issues is way more valuable and sustainable than trying to go on a diet and follow a plan. And I think that's just starting there, is important, and addressing those, at least addressing those issues, if there is that behavior going on.
Sure. I know through lockdown for me, my partner at the time used to love eating chocolate chips, and she was lucky enough that her work allowed her to go out of the flat, but I was in the flat working from home, and it was only when I got to go for a walk at the bookends of the days that I wasn't there, and I wasn't aware of the chocolate chips in the cupboard. Now I went and I bought the groceries, so I could easily get through those chocolate chips and replace them, and she wouldn't know. But why am I eating chocolate chips? Like, they're not part of my diet. They're not part of my plan. They were just there. And they were something that was more exciting, clearly, than what I was working on at the time. So I've definitely been somebody who's used food to just have a little buzz, have a little sugar hit. This is what people will describe to me, certainly my clients. I just wanted a sugar hit. I just wanted to pick me up in the afternoon.
Well, I wonder, when I hear that, I wonder if someone is not eating enough during the day. What does the earlier part of the day look like? Like, when I hear sugar cravings, I wonder, are we eating enough carbohydrate in the morning and in the afternoon? Like, maybe, like, I was working with someone recently who was having sugar cravings, and turns out they were cutting out all their carbs throughout the day. And when we added them in gradually, it helped this person feel a little bit more satiated. And also, this person was really eating way too much protein, above what their body needs, and really not balancing the plate. I think there was also an apprehension and thinking carbs were not going to help her. Like, it was a fear of gaining weight from carbohydrates, which is a very common thing. So it's like just understanding where someone is, and then, like, how do we gradually do that? And this person felt great. Like, they felt much better, and the cravings instantly were improved. But it's, again, not all or nothing. It's not like eat tons of carbs. That is not the message I'm saying either. It's like, we want to match what the body is using that day. And what does your body need? If you're doing more strength, then, there's a certain formula for how much carbohydrate your body is going to need for the day. And what does that look like throughout the day? If you're doing more endurance sports or more endurance activities, there's a certain amount, and we want to get close to those goals and see what we feel like when we're hitting those.
I wonder if that's the direction we go in. I've just got a question from the kind of story that you told earlier. I just want to piece it together with,
yeah, of course,
the notion of being in a calorie deficit and being underfueled. The phrase that you used was, initially it could be adaptive. And I am going through a diet phase at the moment. I gave myself 6 months to do it initially. I wonder if I'll wrap it up in 3, just because I'm quite far into it in a way that I enjoy. And I don't need to be in a deficit forever. I don't need to see the scales go down. I want a look, and I want sports performance. And I have had spasms in muscles that I was saying to you off the call, I've just not felt. So I wonder if I am underfueled as well as in a deficit. If I can say that, like, is there a distinction between it? Could you be down on calories but actually be sufficient in nutrients? When you describe that initial phase as being adaptive, what do you mean by that?
So it's adaptable, meaning like it's mild, like you don't have those feelings. And so, okay, so when I'm hearing that you're like having that trembling, and you're actively trying to reduce your calories, so I would ask about, like, the rest of your day. Are we eating 3 meals and a couple of snacks? When are we exercising? Are we fueling before? And if it's a longer session, during, and then refueling after properly? What's your attitude towards food? Are we fearful of eating carbs because we're trying to cut or trying to have a certain aesthetic? And I also think it's important to note, like, for athlete, like, if you're an athlete and you're focused on performance, you can't also really focus on aesthetic. Like, those are separate goals. And it's like you kind of have to pick one. If you want to do both of those, then both of them might be kind of mediocre. Not mediocre. I don't want to like make it's not a judgment about that. It's more that it's like, it's if you're putting all of your effort into performing and you want to lift more and you want to see what you're capable of in the gym, like you have to fuel for that. And your body is going to adapt to the load and the progressive overload, and it's going to look the way it's supposed to when you're lifting that heavy. Now, if you are also trying to have an aesthetic part of it, that's going to lead to underfueling. So it's like performance is different than aesthetic.
Did you know that each episode of Fitness and Thinking takes about 10 hours to put together? If you've enjoyed them, then I've got a favour to ask of you. It's not your money. It is just a second to like what you like. Maybe a couple of seconds to leave a comment on what you enjoyed, what you changed, what you might have asked the guests, and maybe to ask me to bring on somebody or to discuss a topic that you're interested in.
It's like you've read my Instagram post. So at the start of this year, I really pushed for the idea that I want to help people with aesthetic goals and athletic goals. How do you keep somebody who's already completed their goal? You know, so if somebody came to me and they wanted to lose an amount of fat, and I would say, okay, cool, we've got 3 months to do that. You and I have worked really well with each other. I would like to keep on coaching you. If you are done and dusted with fat loss, then I think you should leave it alone. I don't want you to be in a diet phase. You look great. You've achieved what you set out to do. Go and live your life. But if you're interested in seeing what your body can now do from this position of being a bit lighter, maybe there's been an element of recomp, you know, that they've actually gained a little bit of muscle. Maybe because they've worked on these skills, they're a little bit stronger. You know, what can we do with that now? Can we work on maybe your athleticism? And I've had quite a few people go from fat loss phases to setting personal bests in running and playing tennis. You know, kind of, it's difficult with sports, competitive sports, because it could be dependent on who you play, but feeling stronger as a result of having gotten lighter, become leaner, built the muscle, built the skill, and then specifically worked on their sport to improve at that, you know, and we periodize what they've been looking at, rather than saying, I'm going to make you the best athlete and the leanest one who's going to fit into the wedding dress and win the tournament. You know, that by having these distinct blocks, we got exactly what we needed from each of them, rather than, as you say, being mediocre in all of them. So I really like the idea of aesthetics or athletics. And typically athletes, we hold athletes up as looking aesthetic. You know, there are, to my mind, sprinters, powerlifters. I would quite like to look like some of them. Track cyclists have some of the best legs among anyone. Gymnasts, you know, look incredible. But they are training for performance. They will typically, other than a weight cap, be eating to fuel their performance rather than necessarily the aesthetic. So that's where I think maybe more people should focus on the sport and the performance first, and the aesthetic can come after it, whether that's in a 3-month block or as a result of the work they put into their sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say. I mean, I work in eating disorder. I work with athletes and individuals with eating disorders or to prevent eating disorders. So I don't necessarily encourage fat loss, weight loss. It's more about body acceptance and being comfortable in your body and focusing on what your body can do rather than how it looks. Like that's kind of my background. And it's because it's also like harder and not as thinking that you can eat less or cut or do whatever to change your body. Like the amount of work and time that goes into that, you can get it to a certain point, but how sustainable is that if you have a job or you have other things that you want to focus on? And it's like finding that balance of like having a healthy body image and feeling good about yourself on the inside before thinking like it has to look a certain way to get someone, you know, to get attention or someone to like me or feel confident. Someone needs to feel confident in their own skin and confident with themselves, and then eat well, fuel your body, and using other metrics other than the scale or the body fat analyzer, like metrics like cholesterol, blood pressure, VO2 max, you know, other metrics like your mental health. How do you feel? Do you have energy during the day? Are you able to go out to dinner with your friends and have a proper meal? And then you feel great, and just like it doesn't affect your mental health because you're feeling guilty that you ate too much, or that you won't go to social engagements because you're too afraid that you might overeat, or you don't want to go to a pizza with your friends because it's carbs and you're trying to cut those out. So it's more about being comfortable with yourself, and rather than focusing on the appearance, because I think there's much less, I think we can control it a lot less than we think. But like what you said is, if you're an athlete and you're healthy and you are fueling, you can train more. So you can train at a much higher level if you're fueled, and you won't get bone injuries, you won't get tendon, ligament, other injuries if you're fueled properly. And you can increase your volume if that's something you enjoy and want to do in a healthy and sustainable way, and your body will adapt to whatever the training is. So I think it's like, that's my background, and that's kind of, it's very much performance rather than aesthetic. And I'm not opposed to it, and people can do whatever feels best for them. But like, it's not about changing your body to get people to, it's like understanding why someone would want to do that, I think is really important.
Sure.
Like, why does someone want to change the way they look? Like, what is that going to do for them? And what are their goals in that? I'd be curious. Everyone's different. I'm just curious, like, because I get those questions all the time. And those are questions I ask teenagers that are lifting, and they want to bulk up, and they want to look a certain way. Well, it's understanding like they're growing still. A teenager is still growing, and their bodies are changing, and they're not going to look like the Instagram or their friend or any other thing. Like, they're going to look like themselves. And how do we promote the best version of yourself and fuel properly and feel good? And what does that look like?
I agree with pretty much all that you're saying there. I think there's an irony that people I know to be competitive bodybuilders typically will wear the most clothes in the gym. There are some bodybuilders I know who don't like taking their clothes off for the attention that they'll get, for instance. And then it's another question of why, isn't it? You've done something that's essentially aesthetic focused, but you're not showing the aesthetic off. You don't seem to get enjoyment from other people noticing your aesthetic. So I think for those people, it is very much for them, that it's how they look for themselves.
Yeah, they're trying to achieve, but their goal is different than maybe what the gym goers or someone else might see. But I think, it's appearance, everyone, you can't not see someone like that is, you see people and you see how they look, and people look different. So I understand that, people want to achieve something, but it's like, let's help you achieve the best possible outcome for yourself, rather than trying to achieve something else that might not be realistic and might actually cause harm to your body and cause harm to your mental health if you're trying to do that. And like, why do we need to change? Like, what are the motivations behind that? I'd be interested to know. Those are really important questions that I ask.
Yeah, I think I had it was an unteachable lesson. I learned that I couldn't be in a calorie deficit and chase a bodybuilder look while ramping up my volume for a half marathon. My dad was an excellent marathon runner, but he snapped both of his Achilles tendons. And I think he will have that anxiety about me. And maybe I've inherited that anxiety from him. And as my volume went up, I was more and more aware of my Achilles. And 2 weeks before the race, I couldn't walk. And I wonder if that was as much in my head as it was in my tendons. But leading up to the injury, I was eating north of 3,000, 3,500 calories every day and still losing weight. And that wasn't my intention. I was, at that point, I really did want to just perform. And I was enjoying the running. I was loving the running, actually. And I really enjoyed the headspace and the clarity that I had. And I also looked quite good from my perspective. But I was clearly underfueled because tendons were hurting, bones were like that dull ache. I'd never had that before, and it was constant, and sleep wasn't necessarily, it wasn't the worst sleep that I've had, but I wasn't getting 7 hours all the way through as I was prior to this training block. Maybe it was now broken up into 2 blocks of 3, and that maybe was adding up as well. And it felt like I was playing catch up, which is appropriate as a running metaphor,
And maybe, like you said, maybe there was like underfueling. I mean, one of the things I talk about is 5 days of underfueling. There was a great study that showed 5 days already starts to interfere with your bone recovery. So it doesn't take 6 months to interfere with bones. Like you could start to experience some, bone turnover is impaired in just 5 days of underfueling. Now, I don't know to what extent, I don't know to what the deficit has to be. I don't know how many calories in a deficit would cause that, but it can happen quickly is the message. And if you think about it, like, underfueled muscles are weaker. So you're still doing the workouts and maybe you're just pushing harder at your workouts, or maybe you're thinking, oh, this is how it should feel. It should feel hard. I have to be strong and tough and push through. And so you're in a deficit, pushing harder, and it's just creating more injury inside your body without really overtly. We're having some signs of it, and sometimes they're just very subtle and they're not as overt, right? A broken bone, you can't walk on that, so you feel that. But these are more subtle, and then you're like, how is this? You don't really associate it with eating, and how is this related? It doesn't necessarily make sense. But one interesting way, if we're talking about underfueling, I think to understand it, it's like every month you have, like, if you think of it like a budget, you have a monthly budget with your money that you are able to, you make money or you get in money, and then you have to spend it on bills and things to sustain yourself. Well, if you like lost your job, or you didn't get as much money, or you weren't earning as much and you were still spending, you create this deficit, and over time it gets worse and worse. And that's what leads to worsening of REDS symptoms. And that's how they start to affect your body in more profound ways.
A lot of us will just have to feel that to believe it. I think you and I can talk about this, and we can cite clients. You could definitely cite studies, and they'll still go and make the mistakes.
Correct.
They'll still.
I mean, I've done it. I think we've all done it. We've experienced it, right? It's like, how do we stop that? I think it's just having proper understanding of your body, checking in with yourself. If you're, and just if you're not seeing improvements in your fitness, check in with yourself, body check. Am I getting enough food? Do I feel okay? Are there other signs or symptoms that it could be underfueling? What's my relationship like with food? Am I afraid to eat carbs because it might make me gain weight? Like, is that, do you have to be honest with yourself too? Like, are these thoughts that are happening and your still output is getting higher and higher, that can potentially lead to some injuries.
But we spent an amount of time, Amy, on being in the red zone, so to speak.
Yes.
How do we get people from under to, back to black, so to speak, and then excelling from there? What would your guidance be?
So I think I'm trying to think, like, if I could think of some case studies, like people that come to me with RED, sometimes they're diagnosed through their doctors. So it's more like they come in with a diagnosis and they know. And if someone comes to me and they don't necessarily think it's an underfueling, it's about explaining to them what their body is experiencing. If there's lab work, I will review lab work and use that as more of an objective piece of information to show. But it's also explaining, like, the science shows, like, if you eat this amount of food for that type of workout or for that much expenditure, you should feel better. And I think when you work with someone, it's also building the trust, right? Like, you have to have an established trust with someone. And once you're able to establish that, then if you can encourage them to gradually and experiment with adding in foods and see how they feel, oftentimes they'll report back and say they felt great. And it's not about, like, just following what the guidelines say. Like, because, like, someone, for an example, like, if someone's exercising more than, I think it's 3 hours a day, their amount of carbohydrates is very high, that the recommended amount is very high. But if they're having very few, it's like, let's just gradually get there in increments and see how that feels and allow them some time to adjust. So I would do it gradually, sometimes with objective information and lots of education around it. And if it's a performance-based, then it's like reminding them, this is going to help you. Like, there's a point to having you eat more. It's to help you to feel better. If there are symptoms, it's saying, like, identifying, well, it's going to help that specific symptom, feeling really tired in the afternoon, or craving carbs, or difficulty sleeping, or poor recovery after your workouts, or not being able to do that last rep. this amount of food is going to help you to achieve that. And let's start there, make it a process.
Amazing. And would there ever be generic numbers that you could give to people to aim for or start at? For instance, I was at a talk in Sheffield recently that linked the gut microbiome with the brain. And one of the takeaways from that is that we should be aiming for 30 grams of fiber a day, for instance. And that's a number that I've seen, I think, mandated now by government guidelines in the UK. And as somebody who has observed bodybuilders, it seems that a common bit of guidance is to eat at least 30 grams of fat a day, for instance, because any less of that could have a severe impact on hormone health. So, bodybuilders who have the least amount of fat in their bodies, typically, everybody is told to eat 30 grams of fat a day because we're trying to sustain, normal function as much as could be expected for the type of training and dieting protocols that they follow. Do you believe in these sorts of numbers? Could you recommend numbers like this? What's your approach to that?
I think it depends on the athlete and what sport they're doing or what activity they're doing. So endurance athletes training, let's say like an hour a day. I mean, probably I would say like around maybe like 5 to 7 grams of carb per kilogram per day. And then someone training greater, like 1 to 4 hours a day or something like that, maybe like a bigger range, 8 to 11 or 12 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram. It's a lot.
Yeah.
But that's a big range. Also, it's like, what type of activity? Is it an easy workout or is it a really intense workout followed by a lifting session? So it depends. That's why there's that big range. And someone who's just lifting, maybe not doing a lot of endurance, they don't need as much carbohydrate, but they still need like 3 to 5 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram. Like you still need some because your brain and your heart are really reliant on glucose, which is coming from carbohydrates.
So it is a case of, obviously it depends. There will be edge cases. There will be people who will respond differently to different amounts. That's kind of a given because we can't prescribe one thing for 8 billion people.
And every day it's fluid, right? It's every day is different. And it's like you might do a hard session, let's say. We don't know exactly what the metabolic burn or how much you're using. If you exercise on a certain day and you do like a very heavy volume of training, it may increase your resting metabolic rate for several days after. So you can't say, well, now the next day is an easy day. I'm not going that much. I'm going to cut it back. But it doesn't work. It's very hard. That's why I would provide the information, but we have to have some flexibility to say, because it's like if you do a race or big competition, you're hungry several days after. And, and even if you're not exercising. So, our watches are helpful because they give us data, but you don't just eat the calories on that day and then midnight, okay, stop, start over, and you're at 0 again. Because that's what happens. The watch starts over. So it doesn't work like that. And it's nuanced. And it's not so clear cut. And there's no way to know exactly how many calories we're burning and how to match that. So that's why it's like more about teaching someone to be in tune and be a little bit more aware and set those really great habits, 3 meals a day and maybe a couple of snacks, have that structure. And if you're feeling more hungry, like you should be able to add in a snack in the afternoon, but you have to know you're eating dinner soon after. So can you wait till dinner or maybe you can't? So you should have that. So those are the thoughts that should be going on, not I can only have 10 almonds and an apple because that's the amount of carbohydrates and protein I need in a protein shake. Like that's all I can have. And then I should just be hungry. So flexibility, it always comes down to flexibility. I think hopefully I answered your question. I gave you a lot of info.
100%. I think you and I have the same approach, that it's about what can I add in? What can I do? I have a note on my phone that goes off every morning. These change periodically, but the one at the moment is what can I do today rather than how do I restrict myself? So if I'm feeling flat, what can I personally do to change my circumstances? Have I messaged my mum? Have I asked my dad how his rowing's going? Little things like this that I know these people will appreciate. It's a nice thing to do. It doesn't cost anything other than the time it takes to send the message. And taking ownership and adding, like giving to the day, rather than saying, I must do this, I should do this. It's the shoulds that I'm trying to fight against at the moment. It's what can I do? And yeah, I think you've said that. It's people can be people can be prescriptive, people are prescriptive, but the people who seem to have the most fun with it, the people who seem to stick with it longest, are the people who just live it. And in like my own phase at the moment, I am eating all of the sweets. I'm eating the dried fruits. I'm eating the carbs after the hard sessions because I benefit from that. Now, in theory, I could eat more rice than sugary sweets, of course. But do I get a little buzz, a little naughty kick from eating sweets that I quite like? Yes, I do. And do I also eat rice? Yes, I do. And do I do my best to eat fruit? Yes, I do. So I would rather have the, okay, cool, I know that I need to eat a little bit more because I feel it. I've not tracked a calorie in this phase. I can only weigh myself every so often. There's a DEXA-like machine at the gym, which I use every 4 weeks, and I use a tape measure. That's how I've been tracking my progress. So I've not been as granular as I normally would be. I've just observed the changes in how I felt and how I've looked. And if my performance hasn't dropped off too much, then I can keep on going that way as far as I can tell. But as I've said to you on the call and off it, it's getting to a point now where, you know, my sleep is probably a bit impacted. And these little spasms may be suggesting that I could be fueling in a better way. So this week, I've gone down the rice route more than the sweets route, you know, and I'm doing my best to add in just a little bit more fruit. That's kind of what I'm trying to do with it. But that hopefully level of intuition that doesn't sound too far-fetched from your professional experience has come from hard-earned miles, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's totally, valid. And yeah, that's what I would do is it's the experiment, add in more, do that for 3 days or a few days and see how that makes you feel. There's no prescriptive way to go about it. And you can experiment. That means it's temporary. It might not work. It may not make you feel better. So you have to look at other things, but I think that's a great way to approach it. And I mean, I think that, what I would ask about getting data, like getting from a DEXA and like measuring those types of things on an ongoing basis, it's like, what do you do with that information when you get it? Does it make you eat less? Does it make you change your diet in a way that is going to be restricting? Do you feel bad? Do you feel like you did something wrong? So if you feel that it's keeping you in a way that's supporting your health and your mental health and your goals and your overall well-being, awesome. If it's not helping, because I'll see individuals and they'll say, well, here's my body fat here. I had that done. I'm like, I'm curious, like, why did you have that done? And like, what are we doing with this information? Because if you're thinking I'm going to tell you to eat less, I just don't know how that's going to achieve, you're not going to be able to run a marathon faster if you're going to really cut out a lot of food. So I'm just not sure how we want to include this. But, just questioning it and understanding where someone is coming from. I'm not so adamant about data not being good or good, just like how do we use it and how do we use it in a way that keeps us on track to our actual goal. And cutting calories is not always the goal.
I think to answer your question very head on, if you're game for it, using this scan and using the tape measure, I've actually seen a decrease in size on my right side relative to my left. And I've noticed that my left side has hiked up a little bit more. So a part of my block when it comes to the aesthetic bit is that there's an imbalance between left and right side. And left side is smaller for me, usually. But I balanced it all out, apart from my chest, which is still an ongoing thing. Like if I were to go to an interview and people were to ask what my weakness was, I could hand on heart at this point say it's just my left pec. Everything else, there's no weakness. Don't worry about it. But left arm, I think because I'm doing more left-sided work than my right to see if I can catch it up like that, is actually now bigger than my right. So by working on an imbalance, I've developed an imbalance. And either I keep on chasing the imbalances or I look at my work and think, do I need to push things anymore? And maybe with some of my weights now leveling off and some of them going down, I either need to change the exercise or I need to change my nutrition approach. And that's why I'm saying I'm probably going to keep this phase to 3 months rather than needlessly extend it and see performance just drop off and probably my mood drop off and adherence drop off for arbitrary goals that don't mean anything. I'm not going to step onto a bodybuilding stage. I'm not a fighter. I don't need to weigh a certain amount. I've done it as an experiment on myself because it's fun. I'm in a moment where I don't have many responsibilities. I like the food that I eat. I like the ways in which I'm training. And, just from an aesthetic fun perspective, like I would like to have, this big V-taper look, if only for me. I'm the only person who sees me every day, and that's great. And I like what I've done. And at the end of March, it's going to be Easter. Do I love chocolate? Yes. Will I eat all of the chocolate? Yes. So I'm not going to base my value or worth on suddenly gaining weight, which could just be water weight relative to anything else anyway. It doesn't make sense for me to think that I'm a bad person because the scales have gone up, because I love chocolate and I want to be in a phase where I eat chocolate, you know? So yeah, that's kind of my approach. And I think it's from this position of try to address the imbalances, hasn't quite gone as crisp as maybe we would like to think it would from an objective standpoint, but we're dealing with the human body, which is an incredible machine, a soft machine that doesn't respond perfectly to its inputs. But I've enjoyed what I've gotten out of it. And yeah, from here, I look more towards the athletic bits, having worked on the aesthetics and gotten to a point that I'm happy with. You know, it's been fun. What can I do next?
I think regarding the food intake and chocolate, well, chocolate should definitely be a part of your diet. It's definitely a part of mine. And it's just about finding the balance, really, with food. And, you know, the one piece of information I would impart to someone is just have a balance. Like, you should be able to exercise in the way you enjoy, go to dinner and enjoy time with your friends and family and enjoy it, but it's a balance. You're not doing that every day in a way that's maybe like above what your body needs. But you're including foods in a variety and having a balance. So you're eating all different types of foods all the time. So you're never feeling like you're restricting or cutting out or missing a certain type of food. Because that starts to impact your mental health, like, right? Like if I say don't eat a certain food, like it's very hard not to think about that. So instead of it coming across that way, it's more like, okay, well, let's make sure we're getting a balanced meal first, and then the chocolate or the whatever. It could be, and this is what I tell all my athletes at all levels, pro athletes, as long as 90% of your foods are nutritious, then 10% can literally be anything. It could be butter. Like, it has no nutritional value. It's just something you enjoy the taste of. And it may or may not improve your performance, but it's 10%. Because again, it's those percentages, like 90%, that's like most of your day, and is filled with nutritious foods that are helping your body in some way. And then 10% literally is just pure enjoyment. So it allows someone not to feel like they're in this rigid eating pattern, and like being more flexible, allowing for foods that they enjoy and they don't feel bad doing it. But there are some, some guidelines.
I have some props that I was going to ask you about.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you very specifically on food choices and your marathon experience, just if that's something that you'd like to go into. Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
My personal? Okay.
Yeah. So what I've got here, I am not sponsored by any of the brands that I'm going to flash. I wouldn't mind being sponsored by these guys, but that's a separate conversation. People ask how my skin looks so fresh.
It's glowing. I can see it.
So I have a basic A to Z, A to Z multivitamin. I have max strength omega-3 fish oil, which provides 450 milligrams of EPA and DHA. And I've not been taking it as regularly. I've got a generic zinc, magnesium, and vitamin B6. Now, when I think about supplements, I typically think, can I eat a balanced and varied diet, and can I draw what I need from food? But if there were gaps in my nutrition, I don't eat fatty fish all the time, could I plug it with something else? And we know the benefits, or we've been told the benefits of certain supplements. So my approach to it, and I'm saying this so you can criticize it, take it apart, or validate as needed, is that I don't eat 10 pieces of fruit and veg a day, but when I eat a meal, I'll take an A to Z multivitamin and hopefully increase the bioavailability of that supplement and plug gaps, but not necessarily do it in a way that food would do better. I'm aware of that. With fish oil as well, I eat salmon twice a week if I can, but this is just to top me up on days that I'm not eating the fatty fish. The zinc and magnesium was to help with sleep and to help with testosterone and kind of having an awareness of male hormone health. I was taking creatine, I was taking protein powders. I don't take them anymore. I've not felt a need for them. I've not felt my energy worsen as a result of not taking them. So for the most part, it's food, a multivitamin, and fish oil that I take. When it comes to supplements, my understanding is supplements should be in addition to what you eat. And I wonder if that's enough of a statement to make for you to spring off.
Yeah, I think those are great. And I like the reasons behind them. I think I'm pretty aligned with you on, supplements. I think one thing to note is like, right, I know in the US, and I'm sure it's the same in the UK and the rest of the world, they're not regulated like the FDA in our country, like regulates medications, prescription medications. And supplement industry is not controlled by any governing agency. So I could literally make a supplement in my garage and it says you're going to lift more, 50% more weight, and put a really cool picture on it and sell it to you. So there's no one telling me that I can't do that, as long as it doesn't contain anything that's going to be overtly harmful. So, I think understanding the supplement industry first is very important, like understanding like that they're not regulated. And then I look to make sure it's not harmful. Like, do we make sure like that this is not going to cause harm? Most are not. I mean, we don't even know what's in them, but they're not overtly causing any harm to anyone I've ever seen. But those look great. Fish oil, great reason. I do recommend that for some of my college athletes because they don't have great fish in the cafeterias in schools. That's just a known thing, and it's expensive. So that's great. Multivitamin, great. Always, that's a really easy way to get in all your nutrients. And the magnesium, there's definitely good data to show that it helps with like muscle relaxation in the evening. So like if you're having trouble sleeping, that can definitely be a benefit. Those are great. Other supplements that I would definitely recommend or consider recommending would be based on blood tests. So like vitamin D levels, getting those checked. And UK, as well as the Northeast and just the Northern Hemisphere in the winter, you're not getting sun. And that is definitely going to affect performance. And if you are a growing athlete, a teen, adolescent, or just someone who is susceptible to bone injuries at any stage of your life, you're going to want to make sure that vitamin D level is normal. The sun is your best source. So winter, you want to check it and make sure, or get a recommendation from your doctor if you should be taking it. Iron, extremely important for endurance athletes and growing athletes. Iron levels iron carries your oxygen in your body. So if that level is low, it's going to affect performance. So get the iron level tested by your doctor and then take supplementation as needed. And that's something the doctor can help you with. Other supplements for performance, things that not everyone should be taking, but maybe you've heard the buzz on, are things like beta alanine, which helps the carnosine conversion in your muscles and helps with muscle contraction. And another one, which is super popular in endurance athletes, is sodium bicarb. Lots of talk about it. But again, like it's a ton of sodium, and you have to make sure your body's healthy to take it. You have to have proper guidance. It's not just like take it randomly. You have to take it as directed. There's several companies that are making it in a proper form, and you have to take it the right way at the right time in order to get the biggest benefit from that. But I do have a lot of athletes that use that. And then just general food things. I mean, I like tart cherry juice after workouts. I think that can help with reducing inflammation. Just regular tart cherry juice from the grocery store, just having a small glass of it. Like more of it is not going to be better. Just a small glass is great. Beets, including beets in whether it's in your diet, like fresh beets roasted or beet juice. And there's a product called Beet It, which also is more of a concentrated form, which you take. Do you know it? You're smiling.
It's just
you take it the week.
Good bit of branding, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Beet It. Exactly.
Yeah.
I know. It's so fun. I like the name. But in that brand, I'm not, I have no affiliation with them, but there was a really great study that tested all the different beet supplements, and that product came up with the highest level of anthocyanins. So like that's a pretty good product. And nitrous oxide has a lot of nitrous oxide, which is the point of it, helps deliver oxygen throughout the body. And I would say I feel the same with creatine. Like I don't recommend, like people always ask me about that. So I thought I would just mention it. I'm asked about it almost on every session. Again, I don't know, like you don't know what's in the actual supplement. I think the studies have looked really great. A lot of those studies though are done by the creatine company. So I'm not really sure how to interpret that. I think experiment, I tell people just experiment, see what that is like, take it as directed on the label, whatever the product tells you, 3 to 5 grams a day, but you have to take it like every day, not just on workout days, and see if it helps you. That's kind of the guidance that I provide, but nothing is going to make a difference if you're not drinking enough water, like none of these are going to help you. You have to focus on your hydration. Or maybe if you're not eating enough meals or food throughout the day, these don't like take the place of that. And so I think it's about foundational eating and then adding these in exactly as you said.
From my experience of California, so this is very specific to the state, I struggled to eat 3 square meals as somebody who couldn't access the kitchen, didn't have access to a fridge. Not everybody's going to be a backpacker. You know, some people maybe could keep food at their place of work, or you know, maybe they have better access than I did for the 2 weeks that I was traveling. But when we're talking about regular meals, you know, for me, I'm looking at 3 to 4 meals. That seems to work well for me. I know that people who are deliberately bodybuilding might look at 4 to 6. We have, I think, both got experience of one big meal not necessarily being the most effective way to get your nutrients. And as you mentioned at the top of the episode, could cause GI distress, which could have downstream effects like impacted sleep and malabsorption. You know, everything that could be good about that meal might not end up in you, kind of thing. Or there might be consequences as a result of putting too much into one thing. So that's why splitting meals out could be a helpful approach. And from a muscle perspective, we think about protein synthesis and tapping into these spikes. For the person who is trying to just hit those 3 square meals and maybe in the States and concerned about their budget, and does what they earn go far enough? Have you got any guidance there, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one of my jobs, my nutrition jobs, was working with at an organization called WIC, which helped individuals that could not afford food. And so we provided education about how to get inexpensive, high quality foods. So that was one of my first jobs. So there are a lot of foods that are extremely nutritious that do not cost a lot. And that would be like I could go through meals like breakfast, eggs. Eggs are, you know, now they've become a little more expensive, but you know, eggs are still very nutritious even for that amount of money. Bread, so like toast, some kind of toast. Whole grain, multigrain, not expensive bread though. It doesn't have to be fancy bread. Some can get very expensive. And then frozen fruits, like making a smoothie with frozen fruits, because that's a lot less expensive. Now, you were saying you're backpacking, like that's different, you know, because you don't have access to all the cooking facilities or, you know, a kitchen or a freezer necessarily. But like for on a budget, like that's a great breakfast. Lunch, peanut butter and jelly and fruit and a salad. Like really simple, and that's a really nutritious lunch. Could also be tuna. Tuna's high quality omega-3 protein, like that, you know, and that's very inexpensive. Other things I really like, rice. So like rice bowls, rice and tofu. If you haven't tried tofu, or if you're not a fan, like maybe experiment, like try having, you know, cooking it with someone who does have more experience with it, and they can make it taste a lot better. But like tofu with rice and then maybe like some broccoli, like that's a very nutritious meal, if you like that. And then like a dinner could be a burrito, a homemade burrito, rice, beans, chicken, or you can either do the tofu, you could do what are other sources of protein? Like those, that would probably be the best. And cheese, you can add cheese to it. And then yogurts are great for snacks. So like yogurts would be great. Milk, just like chocolate milk is a great snack. Fruits, you know, anything that's on sale, like look for things that are a little bit more budget friendly. Depending on where you're located, different fruits can be more advantageous. Bananas are awesome, really easy. Like a banana and peanut butter. That can be like before a workout, that can be as an afternoon snack. And there's lots of different options of foods. I mean, I can send you a list. You could post that of foods that are not expensive that provide a lot of nutrition. But it doesn't have to cost a lot of money to eat well. It really doesn't. And I think it's about just maybe doing a little bit of prep work in order to have these foods available so you don't end up ordering in or going out to eat, because that's where it does become more expensive.
Yeah, I think the equity piece, ideally everybody having access, and the first job that you had sounds really valuable, you know, for educating people and introducing them to ideas like that.
Yeah, who knew that would have launched my career in this field? And actually, I still lean into that. Yeah, that information. It was really helpful. It was actually for pregnant women. So it was really, yeah, important for them to eat well.
What I really like, the deeper I get into this industry, these discussions, is that eating whole foods doing your best with sleep. I think just doing your best generally is the guidance, for living the best life that you can. And we've listed supplements, we've talked about athletes, but it all comes from the same foundation, and that's, I think if we can get anything across from this discussion, and we're doing really well in terms of how long we've flown through this, Amy, that I still feel like I've got loads of questions. It's just that it all comes from that base of do your best to just look after yourself and to kind of invest in sleep, 3 meals, and from there everything else can follow, kind of thing.
Yeah, and like be kind to yourself. Like it doesn't have to be a rigid plan, and it doesn't have to look like someone else's plan. It has to make you feel good and make it sustainable.
You have obviously been in the game at a high level for a while now, and you have discussed how you became more involved in particularly endurance sport alongside the time you were spending studying and researching and working in the industry. So where are you up to now as an athlete? How would you describe your journey alongside it? What have you learned from your work that has gotten you to this point that maybe, I don't know, how much has your training influenced your work and how much has the work influenced your training, would you say?
I think I have always worked out with the same mindset. And I was a gymnast growing up, and I did not compete in anything in college. But I think the mindset is always like progress and do your best, like, and do what you can. I have 4 babies, so I was pregnant for many years. I was pregnant for like a decade. And so it's like, do what you can. You can't always get out and do what you want to do. But like, how's my mindset changed? I think really understanding that if your body is fueled and feeling good, like I wish I knew this information when I was younger. And it influences so many aspects of your life and can make your days so much better if your body is fueled. So how has it changed? I think I now can work out even more or exercise at a higher level. And if I'm fueled, I could keep going. And I've learned to do that and kind of surrendered any rigidity that I have and allowed myself to just be flexible because the performance is more important than my own food rules. I don't know if that's the right answer what you were looking for, but like I feel like I can exercise at a greater intensity, and there's a way to fuel. There's a way to fuel for everything. I've done about 9 marathons. I've done a couple ultras. I will challenge myself in any way possible and make sure I fuel for that exercise. And then I understand, just you feel better when you do that.
Well, I would like to think if people were to check you out from this chat, they're going to find any links that you want to share in the description, but also your Instagram. Like, I've loved going through your Instagram ahead of this call because you speak in a way that is research backed, but just really grounded. And it is accessible and it is about helping. And it's so refreshing to come across. So yeah, I think you're amazing, Amy, and I really appreciate your time on this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for having me on. It was a really nice chat, really nice.
Where do you want to send people, Amy, while you have them?
Oh, they can find me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest. Amy Stevens Nutrition. And I have a website. I post blogs on different topics there, which pertain to athletes, which, is always, new stuff is always coming on.
Amazing. All right. I really appreciate you. And yeah, cheers for coming on.
You're so welcome.
Subscribing, I think, is the biggest action you could do other than leaving a 5-star review, because it shows that not only are you willing to engage with one episode, but you think that the thing is good. And that's what those algorithms need. So we have no sponsors at the moment. I'm not looking for a penny, cent or peso from you, just for your support. If you like what we're up to, please do leave a 5-star review where you can. Please do leave a comment saying what you like, saying what you change, saying what it is that you do differently, and 100% share it with your friends, family, partners, workmates, whoever needs to hear the ideas that we're going to explore through this year and have already explored. Share it with them.